Hello, everyone, and welcome to Access Chat. I'm being joined by my regular buddy, Antonio, and Neil is still in Thailand. And I believe it's one of his last nights in Thailand. And so he did try to join, but his in-laws decided that he was not going to join us today. That's all we'll say on that topic, but hope you're having fun, Neil. So we have, and Antonio, do you want to add something there? Best not to. Okay. So we have a guest that's coming back today, and we're very excited to have Susanna Laurin back on the show. And Susanna Laurin is the director of the Funka Foundation, and she told us on air, and I'm going to get her to talk a little bit more, what Funka means in her language. She's also the European representative for IAAP and G3ICT. And then I'm not going to even try to do this part, but she's doing a very, very important job sharing European standards. And I know I'm saying that wrong. So, Susanna, please tell the audience who you are again, but welcome back to the program. We love the work you and your team are doing. We love it. Thank you. Thank you. So do you mind telling the audience a little bit more about who you are?
So thank you, Deborah, and thanks for having me again. And it's a pleasure to be here, of course, as always. It's a little bit about me. We started with the name, the Funka Foundation. So we are an independent research organization, and the word Funka may sound strange to an English audience or English-speaking audience, but it's really a play with words. So it's part of ability. So it's like functionality is the same root of that word. And so it's ability and able, and then also it's kind of what you say when something is really working. You say, yes, I made it. So that's when we also say something is functioning. And that is kind of the play with words. And every university has a Funka department, which is kind of the department for people with disabilities, students with disabilities, and quite a few other newspapers, TV shows, radio programs, I think, and organizations have the same name. So that's the root of that name. And we are a small team based out of Stockholm, Sweden, but we have staff and colleagues all over Europe. And we are focusing on European research on accessibility, disability, inclusion, and everything that has to do with that. But kind of the hub or the baseline of everything is to make sure that people with disabilities are empowered by accessibility or policy work or legislation or standards or every measure we can make sure to push in the right direction. But the idea is really to empower people with disabilities. So we worked very closely with users and many of the end user organizations, both in the countries where we have projects, but also at EU level. And one of our long-term collaborations or organizations that we work very closely with is the European Disability Forum, which is the umbrella organization for all the disabled persons organizations in Europe. So we also do consultancy. We do what every accessibility expert company do with testing and auditing and document remediation and too much training, I would say. And we're actually right now building an e-learning platform of our own just to make sure that it is as accessible as we want it to be, because we have been trying so many of them and we were never really happy. So in a couple of months, we hope to be able to also provide training, like on-demand training, which will take some of the heavy lift out of after my team. So I know they will love it.
Susanna, I know you also are going to tell us about the chair, but before you move away from this part, do you mind just telling the audience, you have a lot of experience with accessibility and disability inclusion. So can you just explore that a little bit more? Because I hope that people have heard of you because you have done so much for our community. You are leading efforts that are really, really changing things. We really appreciate it. But do you mind just tell us a little bit about that as well before you go to the third item?
Yeah, so I'm one of the dinosaurs really in our industry, and I always have a bad conscience that I haven't been better at mentoring young people, and I hope to have time to do that in the future, because I think we all, in my generation, we really should do that, and I haven't been the best in doing it. But I have a vision impairment myself. I have been around in the accessibility community for a long time, but before that, I was doing work for the visually impaired organization in Sweden. And then I went to the independent living, the global independent living movement, and worked for them. And then I've been building a commercial accessibility company for consultancy for 18 years. And then I stepped down as a CEO to take care of my sister who had a severe disability. So I built up really a personal assistance company, which turned to be more of another career, but that was just to make her life work. And then I continued in parallel with the research, and then we have the research institution or the foundation started in 2006, so that has also been around for a long time. But I was one of the co-founders of IAAP back in 2012 or something. I know the anniversary is 14, but we actually started earlier. And I've been doing standards in Europe at the EU level for many, many years. And I'm now chairing the organization or the group that is taking care of the update, review, and creating new standards for the European Accessibility Act. So that is maybe the most difficult thing I've ever done, but it's also a key position to have in Europe right now when this legislation is pushing forward. We were also behind, not me alone, but me and my team at that time were behind the first mobile accessibility guidelines that kind of went into the BBC guidelines and all of that and starting that. So, and we also did accessible gaming very early on and started some of the initiatives have been going on around that. So I think I've been kind of having my fingers in quite a few different things around accessibility. But right now, I myself and we are focusing more on the cognitive part. So kind of the soft human things with the design and UX design and content, and less with the technology, because we think that is already, there's so many good tools. There are a lot of good developers, and more is actually being built into the systems already. And I think the technical part of accessibility should be done kind of by default, instead of first creating something that is not accessible and then remediating it afterwards. So we do that when we need to, but I think that's kind of where the market is rather mature. But when it comes to the more like how the interface works and the intersection between UX and accessibility, there's still a lot more to be done, and especially at the research level, and raising awareness and knowledge and really training people on this. And also the user testing part. So that those are also some of the research projects that we have been leading around making sure that the next generation UX designers know how to make good user testing with people with disabilities. So that's kind of where we're focusing right now.
You're just not sleeping. Okay.
And no, we are not sleeping right now.
So, Susanna, welcome. You briefly mentioned the European Accessibility Act. I know we are 25, big year. As someone that monitors and looks at online trends, I observed that during the development, during the GDPR years, there was a huge noise about GDPR all over the place, all over the media. But I haven't heard the same noise around the European Accessibility Act. Is there an explanation for it?
Well, I don't have the scientific answer to that, but if I'm allowed to guess, I would say that there are a couple of things. So GDPR is an EU regulation, whereas the European Accessibility Act is a directive. So that's a difference in the level of the legislation. And the GDPR comes with heavy penalties that was really pushed from the start, that if you don't do what we want you to do, then you will be fined. And in accessibility, this is more of an inner market directive. So the idea is not to punish, but to make sure that the European companies that sell ICT products have harmonized standard, to make sure that we have a good commercial situation where we can have good opportunities and kind of facilitate and foster innovation in Europe in order to, I think, beat the US, I think is the between the lines, but really making sure that there's an economic push for accessibility. So the European Accessibility Act and also the current legislation in Europe, there's a misunderstanding that this is for people with disabilities. That's not really the case. The whole logic behind this legislation is, both of them, it's that they're inner market. And that is really how we could push them to be accepted by the member state. If this would have stayed in the kind of social vulnerable groups, we want to be nice to people, CSR, that would never have been born. So we need to move the focus to financials, saying that we can earn more money. The companies can do cross-border sales. It's easier for companies to innovate and create new things if we have harmonized standards and the same laws across Europe, and this will make it more profitable. And then we can have a higher level of digitalization or whatever. And then societies will save money from public sector point and also earn money from the commercial point of view. So that is the driver here. And when we succeed with this, it will also be better for people with disabilities. So that's it's the whole logic to this legislation. And I think that is what we're trying to push. And also, if you look at the timeline for GDPR, the big thing that happened was after the application. So let's talk again in June to see what happens, because most people wake up when it's too late. And I think this is when we will have the big push. And even if it's not as big as GDPR, it's still a lot. I mean, we see new companies popping up every week. And we see the big ICT companies, all of a sudden, people who used to be UX designers or usability experts, or they had all sorts of titles a month ago. Now they're all of a sudden accessibility experts. I'm not sure I got me, but they have that in their titles. So the companies understand that this is happening. And we and many others, we do not speak about anything else than this legislation.
I want to make an observation that still relates to GDPR, is that when different countries end up creating small different nuances on GDPR, that end up making the work difficult. No, if you work across borders. So if you have a startup in Germany, you start to realize that the GDPR in Ireland or in Portugal is slightly different. So you also need to consider that. Is there something similar that is happening with the European Accessibility Act?
Yes, there will be differences, but I wouldn't focus on that because the differences are rather small, and it's more on exactly how the enforcement is going to be done, how the monitoring is happening, and the penalties. The penalties will differ between or the way they implement the penalties differ between different member states. But the requirements are the same, the scope is the same, the timeline is the same. I mean, the important things are done the same way. But I mean, European countries are different. We have different maturity levels in the digital space. We have different traditions. Some of us have had laws on accessibility for many years. Some are quite new to the topic, and there are economic differences. So I know big companies hate this, but I think there is a logic to a little bit of flexibility and a little bit of allowing a little bit of flexibility between the countries. I think that makes sense in Europe. We are not exactly the same.
Before giving the microphone again to Deborah, you mentioned that some people might wake up too late. If someone is waking up now, what should they start considering?
Yeah, and you could call me. No, but
can you give me your email address and then?
So I think I would say you need to do three things. You need to look at where are we now. You need to kind of do an analysis of not only how accessible are we, but what internal resources do we have? What knowledge do we have? Are we completely naked here and have no clue about anything? Or do we in our team have people that actually have some kind of knowledge about this? And when you have done that assessment, then you can, okay, do we need to go externally to look for expertise, or do we train people, or probably a combination of the two? But I mean, just to know what you're doing, so you don't start panicking, fixing things, but really start looking inwards, but do that analysis before you start moving. And then there is a training or doing all of that. And I think most companies do that in a good way. What they lack is the third part, which is processes. Because no one who doesn't have a smart workflow and an internal process on what do we do when we create something new or update? Where in this process is accessibility happening? Who has the sign off about accessibility? It's an internal workflow and process thing. That is what is missing, I think, in most organizations that fail with accessibility. They pour money over this topic, but they do it in a not so clever way. And so the processes, that is where I would, so this internal analysis, training, and fixing with finding the right, and of course, IAAP certified experts, certainly, and then make sure that you have a workflow or process that works.
I would also say that one thing that we saw when we went to Europe, I remember the Americans and others, we went to Europe to talk about this after we had done our Section 508 law. And I remember just being really surprised. I realize now how extremely naive I was, but at the time I didn't know that. So I remember going over there I actually represented HP at the time with Michael Takamura. And we were trying so hard to explain to the Europeans, us Americans, how the corporations had really worked with us and they're really helping, and they'd gotten in and they'd solved these things with us, the community. And the Europeans, I remember, were so skeptical, and they're like, yeah, we don't think so. We're not going to. we're not going to build this all the way around with corporate. We're not going to do it that way. We are going to decide. A long time ago, this conversation, like 2004 or something. But I was surprised as an American, as a naive American, at how my perception was that Europeans didn't really trust the corporate brands. At the time, as an American, I just did not realize how much I had been fed that corporate good. I just did not realize it. And by the way, there's a lot of good things about corporations, but I'm not as naive as I used to be. And I just want to say, I am so proud of the Europeans. I am so proud of you guys for doing it, for taking a look at what we did in the States and what others did, and looking at the standards and the legislation and figuring out a way that you could do it to where it feels like we're working together. Because what we did in the U.S., criticize it if you want, I don't care. It's the way we do it. We put laws on the books and then we sue each other and we try to pound them out and figuring it out. And corporations run the United States, just like other countries. Definitely run the United States here. And we know that by the election we just had. That's fine. That's just the way things work. But I think that what is missed by these corporations, and I just want to say this, Susanna, because what I see as these corporations try to figure out how to do this, and they are worried about these laws. They are definitely worried about these directives. They're very worried, but they make the mistakes of trying to do it themselves or working with the wrong people. I remember a group, silly little story here in the United States, big transportation agency here in Virginia, and somebody told them that people that were blind weren't able to use the bus schedules. And so they're like, oh, no. So and by the way, you should say, oh, no, get out there and fix it. But what they did was they took their bus schedules and they made them braille. It cost about $25,000 at the time. Ridiculous. Regardless, that's what happened. And then, of course, as soon as it was delivered to them, like the very next day, it was already out of date because bus schedules constantly change. So they were trying so hard to do the right thing. But I think it's a wonderful example of you cannot guess at this. It is very important to come up with, Susanna said, she mentioned 3 things, but if you don't have a strategic plan of how you're really going to do this, you're going to waste money, you're going to waste time, you're going to make your employees mad, you're going to make your customers mad. Take the time, get it right, your plan right at the beginning, and then continue to update that plan as you go. And that's one reason why I love Susanna, because she knows how to help you do that. So do others, but not everybody knows. So I just wanted to make that comment, Susanna, because that's where I see brands constantly fail.
And I think I would turn that around a bit. I think one of the problems we have had, at least in European industry, accessibility industry, that we lack the big companies. We lack the money and the funding. Most of the good work done here is done by disabled persons organizations, one-man companies or one-woman companies, very small organizations, and they are brilliant, but it just doesn't scale. So that's the other kind of, it's a balance between, so we need both really. But what is so important to me and what I think my team is good at and what we really desire to do. I mean, first of all, we are not for profit, but that doesn't mean that we don't have the muscles, because we do research and we do studies and we work for the commission, for the parliament. We are everywhere where it counts to be. So it's not like we are super small, but we don't need to make money all the time because we are funded by the research we do, which is nice. So we say no to things if we don't like the way the companies work. If they come to us with ideas that we don't approve of, we're not driven by kind of making the most money out of it. And also that the closeness to the disability organizations. So really to always work with the users and not assuming that you know what a user needs just because you met one blind guy last week. We constantly work with the users and have the network of testers and so on. So if you are asking us to do a test, we will never deliver a test that is only done by experts. I mean, all of our staff are IAAP certified, so they know what they're doing. But we would never, ever give you a report on anything without having our network of testers who have, all sorts of disabilities and who are working for us and paid, always paid. But I mean, they are not experts. They are just the man in the street kind of users, but with disabilities. And we have them there to have that, somebody saying, hey, don't forget the user. on your shoulder all the time. So this is not an expert thing only. It's an expert plus community thing. That I think is that's the trick.
And that's a good point. And it is tricky. I remember when we were making mistakes at the beginning and I remember a gentleman worked for me and I'm going to totally forget his first name, but I remember his nickname, which was Mr. Jaws, because he was so good on the screen reader. He was so good on the screen reader. He was so good that he could do things that the rest of us never knew that these screen readers could do. And at first, those were the testers we were using, but they're so clever that they can get around all kind of inaccessible things. And then you could say, oh, well, if they can do it, no, these people are no. And so then we learned we had to start bringing in people with disabilities that are relatively new using their screen readers or people from all.
Yeah, just not interested in technology.
Right. And they're right. There's a lot that way. Right. Yeah. So that's a powerful point.
And I also, another one of my kind of really big things are that I'm so tired of people talking about screen readers. I mean, that's a cool thing. And if you're new to accessibility, it's a really cool thing to discover how blind people surf the web. That's super nice. But everything does not have to do with screen readers.
I agree.
mean, it's just one really tiny part. It's an important part, but there are so many other things that are important as well. And now we're doing a research project with people who stutter.
Right.
So who talks about stuttering in the accessibility community? No one.
I hear a lot of people in India talking about it, but I don't hear it in the US.
So, I mean, there's so many groups of people and so many target audiences and so many user needs that are not forgotten or omitted, but just never in focus because everyone starts talking about alternative text for screen readers. And I go, that's not the most important thing. So that's another thing with organizations. And to your point with creating Braille that was a funny story. To really put the money in the right place, then you need to also just think about the broad picture of user needs. And in the Accessibility Act, I mean, it's about customer service, it's about documentation, about instructions, all of that. That has to do with all people. And we have 25% of the grown-up population in average in the EU who cannot read a newspaper article and respond to control questions afterward. 25%. Because of their native, non-native speakers, dyslexia, cognitive medicine. I mean, there are many reasons why people have problems with this. But just written information is not the only way. You need to think multimodal. And this is one of the big differences between how we see accessibility in Europe compared to the US. I mean, the legal stuff is one thing, but really what we think about accessibility is much more UX design, content, and technology, of course, but just like 30%. A third of what it is technology. And that means that the text-based thing, when I see many US-based websites, is like, this is just text. And it's because it needs to be text because it needs to be read by a screen reader. Yeah, sure. But why everyone else then? I mean, 98% of your users are not screen reader users, and they need other things than only text.
Yeah, I know. And it's really disturbing how, some of our business to business groups have not supported our community of getting this right. But I would also say that I'm hopeful about what AI can help us accomplish with some of these things that we've done, make it all about text, a text alternative. Okay. I think AI is maybe going to help us be a little bit more creative and innovative because we know how to make things accessible to all humans. We just don't do it. So
that's true.
Exciting.
I just hope that there are clever people enough out there to use AI in a good way.
Yes, I agree.
I'm not very afraid of AI as such, but I'm worried about people using it in a stupid way because we still see people thinking that ChatGPT actually knows things. I mean, grown-up people with education still thinks that is the case. So we have a lot of education doing, I think, before we can kind of let technology based on AI be used by anyone. There needs to be an educational piece around that so you use it for the right things. But I'm excited about all the new tech that comes out right now.
No, there are some very interesting ideas being explored when you have the AI on the device itself, not in the cloud. And that permits very interesting experiments. It allows interesting personalization for the user, something that was not possible before.
and with much less implications for privacy and all of that. So
Right.
I think
Helpful.
I see the biggest potential is really in kind of individual assistive technology, if you like, or solutions. I think that's where it's going to really make a difference for people. And cognitive. I mean, there's a lot of
Yes.
new
Yes.
cognitive.
Good point. Right. And I look forward to a time that this is what I'm hoping. I know I'm doing Billion Strong, where I'm trying to get a billion people to identify whatever. But the reality is I look forward to a time, and I think we're going there, where you don't really need to tell you. I don't need to tell you that I have ADHD and dyslexia. You probably can figure it by how disruptive it can be sometimes. But I look forward to a time when people don't have to say, I need this to be accessible because I can't see or I can't hear or whatever. And so right now, I just think we're still having a lot of stupid conversations about accessibility and is it even needed and stuff like that. I think what we wanted to achieve today with you, Susanna, was we wanted to reintroduce you to our audience, let them know what amazing expertise you and your team have. But also another reason why we're doing it is because we like the collaborative way that you've been doing it, the standards, and let's train everybody. And I think that's so important right now. We have got to be more collaborative. I've seen accessibility's gotten so cutthroat as the investor money is poured in. And it's like, I often think the accessibility industry has just forgotten why we're doing this in some cases. And so I'm very excited about what you're doing. And I know that Antonio and Neil are too. So we're very proud to have you on the show. And I'm going to say, first of all, special thanks to Amazon and My Clear Text. We are so grateful to you guys. Thank you for supporting these conversations because our community needs it. So thank you to them. But then I want to turn it over to you, Susanna, so that you can, first of all, tell the audience your URL, and we'll make sure all of that's included. But also, how can they contact you and your final thoughts too?
Well, the contact information is easy. It's funkafoundation.org. So that is I think it's a long word already that. So the website may be the best place, but we're also in LinkedIn and so on. So you can always reach us. We also have a newsletter in a couple of different languages, so you can follow our work. And we are interested in collaboration with academy, with commercial companies, with end user organizations, civil society. We really think that the breadth of stakeholders is what makes life interesting and also what makes our projects more successful. And I just wanted to say that I share your hope that we don't have to speak about accessibility. I've always hoped that I could kind of stop working and be retired because we have fixed it. I think it would take a time still. And what I would really like to see happening, and what we try to focus on, but I haven't found the key yet, is to make sure that every higher education institution has accessibility in their curricula, because that is what is missing. Because before we ever come to the situation where accessibility is there by default and we don't need to talk about it, then we need to educate the next generation of developers, designers, and content managers. And as long as we don't do that, and in Europe we will just continue remediating things afterwards. That is working backwards, and it's very bad. Even if the accessibility community, that's kind of how we make business, but that's not the way we should make it. It's not creative, and it definitely doesn't scale in a good way. So I hope that we can reach the young generation and get more people, more boots on the ground, get more people involved, and making sure that we train everyone who does anything with the digital interfaces and make sure that they know accessibility, so that we can retire and just be happy that we were there when this happened, and then from now on, everything is accessible.
Susanna, I'm going to let everybody go, but one more question before we get off. We would really like you to come back on Access Chat in the next couple of months and do a full episode of what's happening with the European directive. If we could talk you into that, we would really appreciate it.
The funny thing is that I was one of the persons who said, I don't think law is the right way to push this. That many years ago, and that there are several recordings of me saying that. And now I'm kind of the mother of the first Web Accessibility Directive. And now I'm the kind of number one go-to person for the Accessibility Act. Of course, happy to do that. It's an important topic, and I keep doing that. So absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Neil is doing good with his in-laws. And Antonio, thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.